Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Best Books Ever. I am Tyler, and today we are continuing right smack dab in the middle of Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, Suzanne Collins, 11 through 20. These are the games. These are the games. Because I think looking back, the games didn't start until this part. Yeah, because we had the interviews and stuff. So these are the games. Very interesting, I think, overall, looking at, we already kind of talked about it in the last part, gearing up to what these games are and like the preparation and stuff. But these games are very different than what they turn out to be. And, when we see in the 74th, 75th, and then even the somewhat 76th games with Mockingjay. But yeah, these are very different, much more primitive. It is fun seeing where a lot of the ideas came from, like with the gifts, and there's even a little bit of a mention of putting the other tributes' names on a scoreboard. That happens like towards the end of this part, and it's like, oh no, that's actually a pretty good idea. So they know who's there, which then obviously turns into the cannons signaling a death, and then the like digital display in the sky with the tributes names and all that. So yeah, I just think that's overall sort of an interesting perspective that this book gives. Is like, oh, here's where all the stuff that you see and you know and love came from. But aside from that, we do have a lot of specifics to get into. So we will start with the end, like we typically do. Big ending, kind of a twist a little bit, and this is something that you didn't expect. And I'm not sure how this like closes out the book, because next week we're finishing the book, right? So I'm like, how does this play into it? Because at the very end, we see Coriolanus getting taken to the dean. He was hoping that it was some praise, even an apology from the dean to the way he's treating him all these years, but it's not. He walks in and he immediately sees the objects that implicate Coriolanus for the breaking of rules that he's done throughout these games, and is pretty directly the cause of him winning, right? I don't remember the significance. Oh, I do. I do actually. So I just remembered. I didn't remember when I was reading it, but I remember now thinking about it. There's three items. One, there was the napkin or the whatever that had some like punch on it or something. That was, I'm pretty sure, what he wrapped some food in, right? Wasn't that what he like wrapped some food in and like handed it to Lucy Gray on the first day when she was getting put into the arena? What you're not supposed to do. You can't just give your you, you can't just sneak your tribute food going into the Hunger Games. You can't do that. But that to me is probably the lowest uh, infraction. The second item was his mom's silver. What was it called exactly? Compact. That is what she put the poison in, which directly killed Reaper. I love that moment too. Which I guess we'll tangent off real quick and talk about that specifically. Reaper and his oddities, but then I love her at the very end where she was like making a show of swishing out her water bottle into the puddle and then putting it back in and tossing it because we had drones coming in and she was pointedly ignoring them or like not noticing them quite yet, so she can make a show of doing the water. And then she, oh no, well, look at that bunch of drones. I guess I don't need this empty water bottle anymore. Let me toss it aside. And then she gets all this stuff. But in that, when she was swishing it in and out, I'm assuming that she had just a tiny bit of poison in the empty bottle, brought it out, swished it into the puddle, refilled it, unfilled it, all that stuff, basically dumping the poison into the puddle. That was very good. That was very good. And then the third item was the. I already forgot. The third item was. It was the this and then the that and then the some do the snakes. Oh yeah, it was the other handkerchief, whatever, that he dropped into the pit of snakes so that they would then get Lucy Gray's scent, so that they would then not bite her and kill her in the arena. Which is how, I mean, the snakes themselves killed a bunch of people, nothing to do with Lucy Gray, but the fact that she didn't die, she wasn't killed by them when she definitely should have been. And then, not only, does that save her own life, but she also killed someone. Mizzen. Killed Mizzen with a snake. So yeah, so overall, Lucy Gray, because like without those helpful things, I mean, I guess again with a little bit of smuggling of food, that's debatable, right? But with the rat poison, it's like, okay, let's say she didn't kill Reaper with that. Would she have been able to kill Reaper up, after that? I, I will say though, I think when it was down to just her and Reaper, I think that she would have beat Reaper. Just because I don't know why, but Reaper was like refusing to eat or drink anything that came directly uh, as a gift. I don't know why. Like he was only eating stuff, picking it up off of other tributes, and then getting water from nature, I guess. So so if he still refused to do all of that, like if there wasn't a turn, if there wasn't like if this wasn't like a long con for him to get Clementia to just rack up a crazy horde of supplies and then just dump them all on him at once. Um, I think Lucy Gray could have outlasted him because he wasn't making a effort to like stop her gifts or anything, to try to like steal her gifts out the sky, and like no matter how tough or how trained or whatever, again, the whole idea of a um, career isn't really a thing yet. Because you know how in the trilogy, there's the career districts. There's 1, 2, and 4, which are the career districts, and they're like you're not really supposed to, but they're like bred and trained to be winners in the games. That's not really a thing yet, but even with him, like even if somehow, again he's more athletic and he's more, whatever, right? You can only go so long without eating food, So if there's nothing else to scavenge, and you're not taking any food from your from your mentor, and you're not also stopping the only other tribute in the arena from getting food from their mentor, she's gonna outlast you. It's just a fact. So, we can't change what happened, but I still think in an alternate reality, I think Lucy Gray would have outlasted Reaper. Um, the last one though is no debate. Like the snakes being familiar with her scent saved her. You know, she would have died just like a bunch of other people died when the snakes came. But so while, like I said, the first thing with the food I think is the second thing with the rat poison I think is debatable. The handkerchief with the snakes getting her scent I think 1000% saved her and helped her win. Didn't help her win. The first two things helped her win. The third thing with the snakes secured her victory. Um, and even then, she almost got just outplayed by Mizzen because, again, she's not she's not a real player in the games. And so with all of this, the reason that all this matters is because they are now turning Coriolanus into a peacekeeper, um, as like a punishment for, hey, this isn't. So what does that mean? You know, what does that mean exactly? I'm not sure how that's going to play into the end of it. I mean, it is very interesting knowing that he's a peacekeeper. We see what Snow, becomes, what Snow ends up as. So, um, I wonder. I mean, honestly, end of the day, might save him. He's getting income. Maybe that'd be enough income just to, stave off taxes, because, that's like a big thing. Uh, with them right now is that they're barely getting by, and now they're implementing these crazy taxes on the housing that they're not going to be able to, they're going to be shamed because they will be evicted. So yeah, so maybe it's a good thing, maybe it'd be a good thing for him. I don't know. It's interesting because then on the other side of it's like Lucy Gray. What happens to her? Like, does she get punished for anything like that? Like, we're looking again back, or I guess forward to the trilogy, and we know, the kind of like, uh, somewhat of a backhanded compliment version of how winners are treated after they win the Hunger Games. So, does that happen to her as well? I think that would ruin him. That might. It's it's so strange because I wanted to say that might finally turn him against like the capital in the games, and maybe not quite in the same way of that of Ace Janus, but maybe a little bit because he does have a very, very strong fondness for Lucy Gray. But again, we know what he turns into. We know that he becomes like the president of everything. So, real hard to say. Let's see. We got rid of that. Another thing with the snakes and Lucy Gray, which I thought was cool, was she was singing to them, which we're like, why was she doing that? But to her, she has no idea about what the snakes actually are and what they do. She also has no idea that, even if she did know that, she has no idea that Coriolanus was able to get them familiar with her scent so they do not kill her. So we're sort of inferring here that must be something similar to what she's done back in District 12, because she even said herself that she befriended some snakes or whatever. We saw it being a full circle moment going back to the first time we saw her when she threw a snake in that one person's shirt, and or the mayor's daughter, I think, right? So very cool though. Again, it's always nice to see her sing because every time she does, it's very impactful, very meaningful to not only what's happening in the moment, but also some other themes going on that I think are important to people who are tuning into the games. So I really liked that moment. Some other tragedies in the games. Jessup, the fellow District 12 tribute, got rabies, unfortunately. And this was really good. Not good for him, but really good because it showcased a few different things, right? Like when we're looking at Lucy Gray, it did showcase that she was very conflicted because that was her kind of one true ally. And so her wanting to help, but also like, if you're too far gone and you come too close to me, I will kill you. Her having that energy of like, I want to help, but I will protect myself if I have to. I think that was very strong for her character. Aside from that, I don't remember, I didn't write down who was his, was it Listaria? Is that who that was? That was his mentor. Her pushing the fact that, hey, he did not get rabies. He did not bring rabies here from the districts. He was bitten in the capital, and that making everyone nervous. But it's just another thing. I mean, it's true, but also it's just another thing that I think the majority, if not all, of the mentors try to do is like shed some light on the truth of this and how most of them, maybe all of them, are very uncomfortable with the games. And, again, they're not all at the level of Sejanus where they're like, you know, going crazy over it, but they are all very uncomfortable. And, this being the first year with the whole mentor thing, like, this is not sitting well. So I don't know. I just like that she was like, no, this is what happened, and then being like, even Lepidus, right, was like, oof, I don't know, he was getting distracted by the thought of, oh wait, I was at the zoo a lot. But, yeah. So I don't know. That was really good. Let's see. Oh, another thing. Them stringing up Marcus, I thought was very unfortunate for him. I think that we didn't see the previous 9 games, but that was a big moment. That was a statement, right? And this kind of goes into another point I wanted to make. Where is it? I forget who said it, but they were like, how long do we have to punish the districts? How long do we have to do that? Because that's the explanation for why the games exist, is to punish them and to remind them of the rebellion and what happens when you mess with the capital. And again, it is this through line with a lot of people, especially the younger people that didn't live through the war. They obviously see the effects of the war from like their families and also just around them. Like, I mean, you have to be blind to not understand that. But they're just like, yeah, but this isn't, we're killing children that had nothing to do with the war. Again, you can see the connection because you're like, oh, well, their parents were rebels. And it's like, how long? Again, I like that too, where it's like, you do it once to make your point. You are the winner of a war. Even that's kind of sick, but it happens. This is now the 10th year in a row that we're doing this. Like, how long must we punish them? How long must we, like, I was thinking that, like, this is what leads to the rebellion stuff. Like, there was earlier in the book, the arena was bombed. And, again, we push to the trilogy where we have, trilogy obviously focuses around the huge revolution, the kind of revolution to end the capital and its ways up until that point. And it's like, and then the capital will point fingers and be like, see, stuff like this is why we need to. But my thinking is like, well, maybe if you didn't do this every year and it just gets heavier and heavier and heavier every year, where again, I mentioned this at the top, where these games are like, it's like mountain to a molehill, right? These games are nothing compared to what the games turned into 60 years from now. And so, like, maybe if you didn't do this every year, plus we know, I don't know when they start this, but we know the whole like Victor tour or whatever is like halfway between the games. So really every 6 months, the districts are reminded, it's like hammered into them that these games exist and this is what we do and this is our entertainment and this is also punishing you and reminding you about all these years ago about what happened, like something that none of us even had any any involvement in, maybe if we just didn't do that. What if we just didn't have to remind the districts every year constantly, and in this way, maybe there wouldn't be such bad blood. Maybe maybe the sparks of a revolution wouldn't occur, because they're not constantly beaten down. I don't know. I don't know. They have a line where I forget who says it, but they're like, it takes two sides to start a war, and it's like, okay, I get what you're saying, but if the capital decides to just deprive the districts of what it needs and sucks the life out of them, are you telling me that it's now the district's fault that a war is happening because they want to defend themselves and they want to be like, hey, this is not what we want or need? You know what I mean? Y'all are treating us like animals. Y'all are treating us like we're not even the same species as y'all. And then you sit back in your history books and say, it takes two sides to start a war. It's like, yeah, technically you're right, but what were they supposed to do? Just like roll over for the rest of their lives and just again be treated as lower beings their whole lives? That's crazy. Um, I think that gets whittled down a little bit, where I feel like, again, by the time we have Katniss and all them, like, I don't think there's such a disparity in like, oh, they're, if you're not capital, you're monsters. You know what I mean? But there's still a little bit of like, people get treated differently in the districts, So I don't know. Some other stuff with Coriolanus. Let's go to this first. Just a few more points I want to make. The Plinth Prize. That's obviously Sejanus's family. The dad is rich, all that stuff. They claim it is Sejanus's idea. We're still not sure of that. But they claim it is his idea to have the Plinth Prize, which is whoever is the victor, which we now see is Coriolanus. We'll see if he actually gets that. Although, again, here's where the Peacekeeper thing comes into play. Does he even go to the academy like that anymore, or is it like a separate thing to become a Peacekeeper? You know what I mean? It's like what happens with the Plinth Prize there? But just getting to the idea of it, I thought that was fun. Obviously, that's not the case anymore. Like, once we get to the 75th or whatever. But that was some motivation. It's so interesting because these games are so new and they're so primitive compared to where we end up that there's really not a lot of strategy that mentors can give, like when we get to where we get to, there's a whole lead up to it. There's strategy with interviews, strategy with clothing, strategy with training, both public and private training. Just like how you interact and like what you say. And then in the game specifically, like the arena is so much bigger. There's so many more variables, like not only with like the landscape being different every year, but also with the different, the different like motivators that the game maker comes up with to kind of push different tributes into conflict and like get stuff happening. And then I also feel like the gifts get way more elaborate, where right now it's mostly just like food and water, but there's a few other types of things that I feel like they can give once it gets later. So I just feel like there's not a lot of strategy to give. So it's funny being like, hey, whichever tribute wins, that mentor gets a full ride to the academy. It's like, how am I supposed to what am I supposed to do to make them win? I don't know. I just thought that's funny. Where it's like, hey, if you win, it's like, gee, thanks. I guess I'll just give them food whenever I can and hope they win. I have no control over this. Where in the games, we even saw it with Katniss and Haymitch, where it's like, Haymitch and Katniss did kind of low-key have a way to communicate with each other and like strategically do that. But yeah. We get to the moment during the games where we had Suzanne and Coriolanus there, kind of a 1-2 punch here. I want to talk about Suzanne went there, I guess, in the end to die. Like he thought that was going to be the best way, really the only way that he could get his point across with his fight against the games and the capital and all that stuff. Very, very, very small version of rebelling, which we eventually see the biggest way we could do that with Katniss. But um, I don't know. I think his situation called for it, right? Like he was the district boy who came into some great fortune with his parents, what they did, and he became capital. And so he's really able to see both sides of it. He still gets discriminated for it, which is insane. But, he's able to see both sides of it. And he's like, that could have been me. I could have been in there. Um, and so for him to fight out like that makes all the sense in the world. It's like, this is crazy. Like, do we ever stop and think about how crazy this is? Because it really is insane. Like the way we treat them and like the whole idea of the games, like this is what we get to in Mockingjay when they're like trying to vote on if they should have another games, and they're like, and some of the victors are like, no, what? Are you insane? Like we just got out from under the whole Hunger Games thing, and we're like, oh, but what if we had a games for them? It's like, no, like then we would be no better. Like this is an insane precedent to have. Um, so it's kind of that, which I completely agree with. I think the games are crazy. I think again, putting myself in a fictional world like this, I think having them, I don't know. I mean, even having them once is like punishing the rebellion. If I'm trying to put my feet in the shoes of a capital person, capital leader, right? I get how you could want to punish the rebels and try to completely squash all hopes of ever doing anything like this ever again because I'm capital. And that is not a good thing for me, for y'all to keep doing stuff like this. You know, being one half of a war that we don't want to be in. We just want you to submit to us at all times. However, having a death match with children is absolutely out of this world. Like, that is the sickest thing I could possibly think of, So, like, I don't know. Having them annually, like, even having them once and being like, hey, if we ever get, like, even just having them once and then threatening with it, with you having them again, I think would be enough. Like, more than enough to be like, hey, if we ever get a whiff of any sort of rebellion again, we're having a second Hunger Games. You know what I mean? Like, even that, I'd be like, all right. But having them annually just because, like, annually and forever, absolutely wild. And then the other thing with this moment was Coriolanus killing the District 8 boy. That's huge only because, again, we're kind of building these pieces to who President Snow eventually becomes, right? So him having a death on his hands at so young like that's got to be something that doesn't ever leave you. But I could see how it also kind of shapes who he is, where it's like, even Dr. Gall tried to make the point of like, we're humans at the end of the day, and when it comes down to it, if it's you or me, you are going to choose you every time, and I'm going to choose me every time. So you can kind of see how that turned into President Snow, and even Dr. Gall's thing, her like essay assignment with like, oh, what is chaos and what is control, all this stuff. You can see, I think that's one of the biggest things for, probably the biggest thing with Coriolanus' character is I don't remember if I mentioned this last week. I don't know if it was as prevalent last week or not, but if I did, I'm sorry. But I do have to mention it again because I think it's even more like in your face with this part, with these chapters where he is constantly in this struggle between what he feels is good and bad, right? So, on one hand, you have the capital, you know, uh, his family, his grandmam, what they believe, the war that happened that affected his family, that killed his parents, um, all this stuff, right? So, on that hand, it's like, I am capital born, I am honored, I'm a snow, like, I need to bring honor to this family. Um, what the rebellions did, they deserve what they got, like this is how things are, like even his like resentment for Sejanus and being like, oh, you, for one, you're capital, gross, and for two, how could you ever complain about anything? You were able to claw your way out of a district and get to the capital, and now you're rich, and now look at me, I'm a snow and my family is supposed to mean something, and I'm doing way worse than you are, so he has that capital side of him, like even him being kind of ticked off that it seems that none of his classmates really know the anthem. He's like, after all this time, you think that they would try a little bit. And it's like, man, there is that deep rooted like patriotism in him that just won't go away, you know. But then there's the other side of him that sees the districts because he's a child, and when he tries to scrape away for just a second all the stuff that has been told to him, and he just tries to look at it without any of that, without any of that preconceived notions, he's like, man, that does kind of suck, doesn't it? Kind of suck, and like we're supposed to be capital, we're not really doing better than them, so I know how he's, um, and then he looks at Lucy Gray as well. I think Lucy Gray's even, probably the biggest catalyst for this, where, he sees what she, he has been told what she lives through. He's seen the districts. He's now looking at these games even more intently than any other games, and he sees how crazy it is. Kind of like I just talked about with like, how crazy an idea of the Hunger Games is. You know, he sees small things as well, like just how they were all corralled up and they weren't given food or water for like days. And then he gets upset at that. Um, he sees Dr. Gall and like the kind of experiments that like she's doing to people, right? Um, I don't know. I feel like he's constantly giving two thoughts to everything that happens in his life. Um, where it's like, oh, well, this has to happen. This is how it is. But also, looks bad, looks rough. Maybe it can be different in the future. I think his relationship with Sejanus is like the most obvious example of this and the most forefront that you could easily look at to be like he wants to save him, but he also thinks he's an idiot for acting the way he is, but he also kind of understands some of what he's going through, or like, not what he's going through, but like some of the points that he's making, but then also he thinks he's being like irrational and like, that's just your like district side speaking and you don't really know, like you weren't born here. Um, but then again, he looks at Lucy Gray and then, he looks at, he hears how his grandmam talks about Lucy Gray and in his mind, he's like, yeah, but that's not, Lucy Gray isn't really like that, so that's not fair. And that kind of extends to all district. And it's like, what if none of them are like that? You know, um, yeah, it's so interesting when like either side of himself kind of peeks out, and we kind of get both perspectives on everything, even though he's just one person, and they're so far away from each other. So I think we're probably going to have like a big moment that kind of forces him to choose. And unfortunately, again, this is a prequel. Unfortunately, I feel like he's going to end up choosing the capital. And I don't think it's out of like patriotism, But I do think, I don't know. I don't know. Let me just get through one more point and then we can get to predictions. The last note I had was just about their budding romance. Obviously, if you have read along with the uh, other books in this series, the other Hunger Games books, or if you have followed along with me with any of the other series I've done, you'll know that romance, big thing for me. Love romance and stories. Cling to it. It's great. Love it. Good times. We saw for a little bit there where, it was seeming that they were going to get closer, and then with this part, with these chapters, they got really close. It's like, oh, we've got to maybe like each other, and then they kissed. And they were going to try to kiss a second time, but the Peacekeeper was like, all right, enough of that. Obviously love that moment, right? But where does it go from here? Where does it go from, again, there's these questions of what happens to Coriolanus, what happens to Lucy Gray, how real were the emotions in that moment. Obviously, we can't look inside Lucy Gray's head, but even though we can look inside Coriolanus' head, it's like, was that, like, how strong are his feelings for her? Was it just as him kind of getting caught up in the moment? This being his first, and also his first, he talks about like some other girl or whatever that was like a dare or something, but this is like real, like he feels like there's a real connection. So, I don't know. I just wanted to sprinkle that in because love romance. Obviously, romance was a huge integral part to the trilogy. So we'll see what happens with this. Obviously, I think getting into predictions for a second, or I guess for the end of this episode, there's going to be a real test. Again, I don't know how him being a peacekeeper plays into all of this, but there's going to be a real test between him and Lucy Gray and like how he feels about her, how strong his feelings are, and what he has to battle in that moment. What happens to her? Does he fight for her? Do we have a happy ending where he ends up with her? Does it end up with her being killed? I'm just so interested to see, do we get a tragic ending? Because like I said, in Mockingjay, when I put down the story, it was just like, it was such a like melancholy because there's great things, right? Like, oh, the future is bright. We're post games, we're post snow, post District 13. Like, things are looking up. Things will get better. They will heal. But was it worth it? The answer was yes. But it still doesn't take away from all the death and destruction and loss and broken relationships and just everything, right, that happened. So how tragic will this ending be? Again, we know where Snow ends up. We're assuming. I mean, I would say, trying to put some things together, I would say Lucy Gray dies. Only because I feel like if they were together, Snow's still alive. We haven't seen Lucy Gray. We haven't seen like a wife or anything of his, so I'm assuming she's not alive anymore, and I feel like he would do everything to keep her alive if they were in love and if they did survive past this book. Or maybe Lucy Gray turns on him or something. Again, we still have the unknown of like, well, I feel like Tigress, given what we knew, what we saw for her character and kind of how she acted towards the idea of Snow with Katniss. We feel like Tigress maybe turns on him a little bit. We're not super sure there, so maybe that has to do with Lucy Gray. A lot of questions. So we'll see, though. We'll see what happens in this last part. Obviously, just to reiterate, next week we are finishing the book, chapters 21 through 30. That'll be the end. And if there's an epilogue, I didn't see if there's an epilogue, but we are finishing the book. So yeah, let me know what you thought of these chapters. Any predictions for the end of the book? I'm very excited for it. What happens to Coriolanus? What happens to Lucy Gray? Even Tigress, I'm excited for. Sejanus. Does he have like one last, hoorah or something? Dr. Gall. Crazy scientist, right? Yeah, and just, do we get an ending where it's like, all right, yep, and now president. I mean, again, I don't think this ends with him becoming president or anything like that, but does it end with a clear vision of like, oh yeah, yep, I totally see how the ending to this book, we then have a few steps, and then we get to the beginning of the Hunger Games and, Catching Fire and Mockingjay and all that. So we will see. We will see. That is it. Until next time, read the chapters. We'll see what happens with our somehow beloved protagonist. And yeah, I hope Lucy Gray turns out to be all right.